Every autumn, we light piles of branches on fire and watch decades of fertility disappear in a smoke-filled afternoon. On the surface, it looks like cleaning up the yard, but in essence, it is more like voluntarily giving something away. Water, carbon, organic matter, and microbial habitats, and future food that could have grown there, all turn into ash. Meanwhile, most people are taught to keep buying more fertilizer, buying more water, and more external inputs. But in the mountains, one farmer chose the exact opposite. He buried wood in the soil, and the land began to function, like a long-running system operating on its own. If you break this method down, it is actually very simple. Collect wood, bury the structure, and let the system cycle itself. Yet these three steps completely change how soil behaves. In the Austrian Alps, on slopes that are cold and thin-soiled, extremely harsh for agriculture, Sepp Holzer built raised mounds, using logs, brush, and soil, then planted crops on these structures. Under conventional agricultural logic, these areas could barely support spruce trees, but reality flipped the assumption, with lemons growing in snow, kiwis appearing on hillsides, and grapes ripening in cold winds. There are no water hoses stretched across the land, no sprinkler systems running daily, and no warehouses filled with chemical fertilizer. The entire system relies on one single thing: whether soil can become a structure that stores water and feeds itself. From an operational perspective, the system follows a clear chain. First layer, wood acts as a long-term water storage skeleton. Second layer, branches and brush fill the gaps, creating buffers for air and moisture. Third layer, topsoil is added so plant roots can connect directly into the system. Fourth layer, microbial cycles are activated through natural decomposition. The real turning point is here, because Holzer did not farm harder. He simply changed how the land functions. Industrial agriculture works like this. You flatten the land and plant monocrops. Add external water and fertilizer, and control everything precisely. But this system has a clear weakness. Once external inputs stop, it collapses quickly. Soil hardens, water runs off, and roots starve. A field that looks perfectly organized can fail under extreme conditions. The wood-based system, however, removes input dependency and replaces it with internal circulation. From a functional standpoint, it solves three core problems: where water is stored, since wood acts like a sponge; where nutrients come from, as slow decomposition continuously releases carbon; and where roots grow, reaching downward into the internal structure. In other words, this is not just a planting method. It is a kind of underground infrastructure system. Authorities did not see it this way at first. What they saw was disorder, steep slopes, and unapproved excavations, piles of decaying wood, and land that did not look proper by agricultural standards. In conventional logic, these are risks like erosion, landslides, and flooding. So fines were issued repeatedly, as if forcing the system back into control. But the reality was ironic. Productivity became more stable, because the land no longer relied on external control, and instead became self-sustaining. From a systems perspective, the difference is clear. Conventional farming is sustained by continuous external inputs, while the wood-based system is sustained by structural design. This right here is the dividing line. The success isn't just burying wood, but in three critical design details. First is wood selection. Hardwoods like oak and maple are preferred, because they decompose slowly and provide long-term structural function. Second is layer compaction, where wood must be tightly packed. Gaps cannot be left, otherwise air pockets destabilize the structure and reduce water retention. Third is the nitrogen activation phase. In the early stage, nitrogen sources like grass clippings or manure must be added. Otherwise, microbes pull nitrogen from the soil itself, causing plant yellowing and stunted growth. Once these conditions are met, the system stabilizes into a cycle. Water is stored, microbes activate, and roots extend downward. Nutrients circulate, and the soil gradually deepens itself. Many people underestimate this, thinking it is simply burying wood and planting vegetables. In reality, it behaves more like a slow ecological machine. There are real-world comparisons as well. People using wind-fallen maple, grass clippings, and manure to build similar beds reported reduced irrigation needs within the very first year. Even during summer droughts, these beds remained moist, while conventional garden beds required constant watering and often began to decline. However, if something is done incorrectly, the system responds immediately. If no nitrogen is added, plants turn yellow and stop growing. If there is too little wood, you get insufficient water retention, and a loose structure leads to collapse and drying. In other words, this is not low maintenance, but rather design determines long-term stability. This is also why the method matters. It changes the cost structure. You stop continuously buying fertilizer, water, and soil amendments, and instead build a long-term underground system that runs on its own. From this perspective, it is essentially turning natural waste into long-term infrastructure assets. So the question becomes very direct. Are we actually managing land? Or are we constantly patching a system that could already run on its own? If a hillside can store water, feed itself, and sustain production simply by burying wood, do we still need the agricultural system we currently depend on, requiring constant input? And more practically, if you had a pile of waste outside your home, would you keep burning it, or turn it into a system that keeps working for years?